Have you ever gotten a call in the middle of the night and just known your life was about to change forever? It was 3:07 a.m. when my sister called, her voice shaking. Mom collapsed. She kept asking for you. But when I got there, Mom wasn't in a hospital bed. She was calmly sipping tea like nothing had happened. No oxygen tank, no doctors, just a perfectly staged breakfast table and a stack of documents with my name on them. That's when it hit me. They didn't need me. They needed my signature. I'm Isabel Whitmore, the sole legal heir to a legacy they can't touch without me. And they thought I wouldn't fight. But here's the twist. I found the proof. A forged signature, misspelled with one L, and a voice recording where my own family says, "She still thinks we love her. Use that." If you've ever felt manipulated by the people closest to you, this story will show you how to spot the lies, protect your name, and take your power back. But watch now, because if you wait, they might take more than just your trust. They might take everything. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way, I can send you a special shout out. Now let's begin our story together. The ring was sharp, unnatural, like someone had dropped a metal spoon onto tile. I blinked at the red digits on the clock. 3:07 a.m. I reached blindly for the phone. Only two kinds of calls happen at that hour. One means someone's gone, the other means someone's about to. It was Vanessa. My sister hadn't called me in months. I heard a sniffle before her voice cracked through the speaker. "Isabel, it's Mom. She collapsed. They're taking her to St. Augustine Memorial." I sat up so fast the comforter tangled around my legs. "What happened?" She couldn't breathe. Then she just dropped. "She kept asking for you. Please, just come." That was all it took. In the haze of worry or guilt, I couldn't tell which, I moved without thinking. I threw on the first pair of jeans I found, grabbed a sweatshirt, stuffed clothes, and a half-charged charger into my duffel. No makeup, no toothbrush, just my keys and the weight pressing on my chest. Outside, the air was thick with late summer heat, even at that hour. I started the car, and the radio flicked on with some midnight AM station, mumbling about coastal humidity and patchy fog on R16. I drove past empty gas stations and silent neighborhoods, the kind that all blur together when the world's asleep and only your thoughts are awake. By mile 30, the adrenaline wore off, replaced by a kind of mental autopilot. I hadn't been home in years, not since the funeral. Savannah felt like another lifetime, but hearing Vanessa's voice tremble like that, hearing that Mom wanted to see me, I wanted to believe it. The fog thickened as I crossed into Chatham County. Pine trees stood like sentinels along the highway. My headlights barely touched their trunks. By the time I reached the hospital parking lot, the sky was lightening to a dull gray, as if the sun didn't want to commit to rising. Inside, the hospital smelled like lemon antiseptic and machine oil. A young woman at the front desk glanced up, eyes soft but unreadable. "I'm here for Diana Whitmore," I said, voice already sounding foreign. "She was brought in this morning, collapsed. My sister said..." She typed something into the computer, then offered a practice smile. "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name currently checked in." My stomach turned. "Are you sure?" It would have been around 3:30, maybe a cardiac event. "No one by that name. You might try St. Joseph's across town." I stepped aside, fingers numb against the phone screen. Vanessa picked up after the second ring. "Oh, you're at the hospital." "Yes, and they said Mom's not here." There was a pause. Then her voice softened, almost too calmly. "She's better now. It must have been a panic attack or something. She didn't want to stay. Just come home, Iz. She'll explain." The call ended before I could say anything else. I drove the rest of the way on muscle memory, like the car itself remembered the turns my hands had forgotten. The fog had started to lift by the time I turned onto our old street. Hydrangeas bloomed along the edges of the Whitmore lawn like nothing had ever gone wrong there. The house looked the same, maybe too much the same. porch lights still warm, windows reflecting early light. The brick steps were damp with dew, and the scent of fresh lemon polish hit me before I even opened the door. Inside, it was still, too still. Then I heard the soft clatter of dishes and the low hum of a kettle boiling. I walked toward the kitchen, heart pounding. There she was, my mother, Diana Whitmore. Wrapped in a silk robe the color of oyster shell, seated at the head of the breakfast table with a steaming cup of Earl Grey in her hands. She looked up at me with mild surprise, as if I'd arrived early for brunch. "Oh, good. You made it." I couldn't speak. Across the kitchen, the stovetop glowed under a pot of soft boiling eggs. The AC vent above me hummed cold air onto tile. The entire room felt like a showroom, pristine, untouched, as if someone had spent the last hour making it look lived in, just for me. No oxygen tank, no collapsed matriarch, just a breakfast tableau and the unmistakable feeling of being played. Vanessa breezed in moments later, barefoot, smiling. "I figured you'd be hungry. Coffee?" She didn't wait for an answer, just poured it, cream already swirled in, the way I used to take it in college. She handed me the mug like it was peace offering. I stood for a long second, mug in hand, trying to make sense of the performance around me. "We've been waiting," Vanessa said, that same bright tone she used at charity luncheons. "There's something we'd love your input on." And just like that, I realized something far more dangerous than a heart attack had brought me home. The smell of rosemary always reminded Toy of Thanksgiving, but that night it clung to the air like perfume worn too strongly. I stood just outside the dining room, one hand still curled around the coffee mug Vanessa had given me, staring at the table set like we were about to welcome an ambassador. The china was heirloom, the kind with delicate blue vines winding across the rim, and the table itself stretched farther than I remembered. There were fresh flowers in a vase so perfect I could see my distorted reflection in the petals. Vanessa waved me over, motioning to the only empty chair. It was near the far end where the server used to stand. My usual seat, the one between Aunt Libby and the sideboard Grandpa used to bang his cane against, was already taken. "Is this mine?" I asked. Diana looked up from slicing her lamb, her tone as smooth as ever. "That one's for guests. But I suppose you won't mind just for tonight?" I took the chair. It was firm, cool, and placed just slightly out of the main conversational arc. The message was quiet but clear. I was adjacent, included but no longer central. Dinner began with light talk, property updates, a niece starting her freshman year, someone's neighbor winning a golf tournament. I nodded at the appropriate moments, offered faint smiles, but mostly I just listened. The family around me laughed a little too easily, passed dishes a little too politely. I watched Diana fold her napkin just so after every sip of wine. I noticed how Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me each time someone mentioned change or the future. The lamb was cooked perfectly, carrots roasted to a honeyed sheen. Even the mashed potatoes were whipped just enough. It wasn't a welcome meal. It was a performance. Then came the toast. Diana lifted her glass. "To legacy," she said, her voice low and resonant, "and to the quiet strength of staying united even when seasons shift." Vanessa chimed in, her tone sweet and airy. "And to new beginnings, especially the kind that honor our family's future." There was a round of gentle clinking, a few murmured hears. That's when I noticed him. Seated beside Charles was a man I didn't recognize right away, younger than most at the table, his suit dark and fitted, his expression neutral. He hadn't spoken much, but the moment Diana finished her toast, he reached into a slim leather briefcase. "Isabel," he said with a smile just short of genuine, "I'm Graham Ellis. I help manage your grandfather's estate. Nothing urgent tonight, I promise. Just some paperwork we've been aligning ahead of the transition." He slid a manila folder across the table toward me. His fingers didn't linger, but Vanessa's eyes did. I opened it slowly. Inside, printed copies of what looked like financial restructuring documents. At the top, bold and clear, was my full name, Isabel Lenora Whitmore, and beneath it, a signature that looked eerily familiar. I didn't react right away. My fork hovered over my plate. I blinked twice, staring at the curve of the signature. It wasn't mine, but it could have been. Not exact, not enough to fool me, but enough to fool a banker or an attorney or a judge. I looked up. No one said a word. They just waited. Vanessa refilled her own wine glass, her pinky extended just so. Diana took another delicate bite of lamb. Charles leaned back slightly, as if this moment didn't concern him at all. Graham folded his hands. It wasn't panic I felt. It was the kind of clarity that settles in when all illusions fall away at once. I took a sip of my own wine, dry, a little too cold, set it down gently. "Out of curiosity," I said, my voice even, "who dropped this at the bank?" The scrape of a knife against a plate rang a second too long. Diana's smile flickered, then returned. Vanessa tilted her head as if the question were too complex to follow. No one answered. That was all I needed to know. I let the folder rest on the table beside my plate. Didn't touch it again. For the rest of the meal, I nodded politely. I passed the rolls. I complimented the carrots. But inside, a different kind of movement had begun. Not fear, not even anger. Just the soft, unmistakable sound of a door unlocking. And somewhere behind their well-lit eyes, I wondered if they noticed I'd already stepped through it. The kitchen smelled like yesterday's rosemary and cold biscuits. I stood by the sink, fingers tracing the rim of a chipped teacup someone had left behind. Outside, the sky sagged under low clouds. One of those mornings where the sun couldn't be bothered. I hadn't slept much, just floated above the mattress, thoughts looping like a low hum in the walls. That folder, that signature, close, so close. But not mine. Down the hall I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. "Morning," came Graham's voice from the sunroom. He wore the same suit as last night, just without the tie. "Didn't want to startle you. Thought we could finish what we started." He gestured toward a fresh folder laid out on the wicker table. His tone was even, pleasant, too pleasant. "Let's just tidy this up before your birthday," he added with a smile that never reached his eyes. I said nothing, just nodded, walked past, and climbed the stairs. In the guest room, I found the manila folder from last night still on the dresser. I opened it again. The papers looked more formal in the daylight. Each page had a fine watermark, faint gray lines forming the outline of the Whitmore crest. I turned to the last page, my name printed bold, then signed below, and there it was. I had missed it before in the dim dining room, but now, lit by a square of pale morning light, it was clear. Isabel spelled with a single L. I stared at it. I'd been correcting that spelling since the 3rd grade. The signature itself was fluid, convincing, but whoever had written it hadn't known me well enough to get my name right. My hand went cold. I snapped a picture, making sure to catch the corner with the watermark, then another. Then I flipped through the other pages, capturing each one in the same soft light. Quiet proof. Just as I backed up the images to a Dropbox folder I hadn't opened in years, my phone buzzed, a Savannah number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered. "Hi, this is Layla from Atlantic First Bank," the voice said. Polite, efficient. "You'd left a message regarding an account filing under Isabel Whitmore?" "Yes." I sat down slowly. "Can you tell me if anything's been submitted in my name in the past week?" A pause. "Actually, yes," she said. "We have documents dated last Thursday concerning a trust restructuring. It appears notarized and processed." My throat tightened. "Was it submitted in person?" She hesitated again. "Initials on file say GE. That may correspond to your estate representative." I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I said. "I'll be following up shortly." I hung up just as the doorbell rang. I heard muffled voices downstairs, the creak of the foyer floorboards, then a familiar sound, rubber-soled shoes on hardwood, moving with quiet authority. Naomi Fields appeared in the doorway, balancing a warm peach cobbler in both hands. "I figured you hadn't eaten anything real," she said gently. She hadn't changed much. Hair grayer, maybe, pulled into the same tidy bun. She wore a simple navy cardigan and carried a canvas tote over one shoulder. I stood to hug her, and for the first time in 2 days, something inside me exhaled. We sat on the edge of the bed, the cobbler between us, its sugary steam curling into the still air. "I heard some whispers," she said. "Didn't want to say anything until I had something solid." From her bag, she pulled 3 folded pages. One was a lawsuit notice, Langford Holdings listed as a respondent. Another was a listing for antique silverware. The third, a mortgage document with Diana and Charles's names. "A second mortgage," she said, eyes steady. "Filed 2 months ago, quietly." I blinked. "They used the house." Naomi nodded. "And they've been selling family pieces online. The silver, a mirror from the East Wing, even the music box from your great-grandmother's room." I stared at the papers. Names, numbers, signatures, all tangled into one knot I hadn't even known existed. "They don't need your money," she said softly. "Not yet. They need your name, on paper, to buy time, to keep the image intact." I said nothing, just reached for the last page in the manila folder again. "I didn't sign this," I whispered, "but they thought I might, if the timing was right, if the guilt ran deep enough." Naomi watched me, and that's when I saw it again. The misspelled name, 1 L, I pointed to it. "They got it wrong." Naomi leaned in, her breath caught. "That might be your wedge. That's not a legal match." I looked back down at the page. My signature. My name. But not mine. Not really. I stood up slowly, folding the documents, slipping them into a new envelope I labeled with today's date. Then I pulled out my old laptop, connected to the guest room's flickering Wi-Fi, and uploaded everything to the cloud. Secure, dated, backed up. "Naomi," I said, turning to her, my voice even now, "if they've already submitted this, how do I make sure it doesn't stick?" She looked at me, quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her tote and pulled out a small notepad. "First, we make a list," she said, "of everything that belongs to you. Then we make sure the law remembers what they wanted you to forget." By 5 o'clock, the Whitmore garden was a painting. Peach linen napkins, silver platters, and magnolia blossoms tucked into porcelain vases that looked older than most of the guests. The sign near the patio read, "Summer's Last Toast," in Vanessa's looping gold calligraphy. Cicadas hummed beneath the low jazz, slipping from vintage speakers, and the August heat clung to the air like an old secret. I wore a soft blue sundress I'd left in the back of the closet years ago. It still fit, though a little tighter around the shoulders. Diana would call that carriage. She always had a way of complimenting you sideways. As I moved through the garden, people smiled like nothing was amiss. Vanessa floated from group to group, laughing, touching elbows, offering compliments like hors d'oeuvres. I saw her pause to fix a crooked candle on the appetizer table. She'd always been good at details, especially the ones that helped her control the narrative. "Isabel," she called across the lawn, "don't be a stranger. Come meet the Rutherfords. They just invested in the new wing." I smiled and waved, but made no move to join them. Instead, I wandered toward the lemonade station where Diana was mid-conversation with someone about preservation tax credits. Her voice was light, effortless. I waited for her to glance my way. When she did, she lifted her glass like a queen acknowledging a courtier. Not warmth, recognition. "Darling," she said once the other guest drifted off, "you've been so poised through all this. It means more than you know." "Of course," I replied. "It's important to keep the family intact." Her eyes lingered on mine just a breath too long before she nodded and turned back toward the buffet. I knew what this was. This wasn't celebration, it was maintenance. The guest list had been curated to reinforce alliances, the music chosen for mood, the outfits pastel enough to mute tension, and I, once again, had been dressed and placed like a prop. Graham joined me later near the hydrangeas. He was in a pale seersucker blazer and sipping something too amber for summer. "You've handled this with grace," he said. "Most people would panic." "Is that what you expected?" He chuckled, looking toward the sunset. "Number. But you're not most people." Then he added, a little too casually, "Once everything's in the system, no one can touch it. Just a matter of time now." I nodded slowly, letting my silence be agreement. He tapped his glass against mine. "To the next chapter." I clinked back, all smiles. The old saying rang in my ears, "Never show your cards unless you're holding the whole hand." As the sun dipped lower, Naomi arrived. She wore an oatmeal-colored blouse and wide-brimmed hat that made her look more like a visiting professor than a guest. She didn't approach anyone, just circled the edge of the gathering, observing like a seasoned scout. When she finally made her way to me, it was brief. "Nice turnout," she murmured, handing me a folded napkin. Inside, something small and hard. "A thank you token?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "From someone inside, they wanted you to have it." Then she slipped away, vanishing into the soft murmur of clinking glasses and polite applause as Diana raised another toast. I waited until twilight settled, then slipped upstairs to the room I hadn't slept in since college. The walls were still the same pale green. The ceiling fan squeaked softly, same as it had when I used to lie awake at night, wondering if I'd ever get out of this place. I unfolded the napkin, a flash drive. My old laptop hummed to life slower than I remembered. I plugged the drive in, fingers steady now, not shaking like the night before. The audio started mid-sentence, a low scrape of a chair, the clink of china. Vanessa's voice first. "She won't fight. She still thinks we love her." Then Diana. "Then use that." "It's all we have left." The silence that followed said more than the words. I let the clip play twice, 3 times. Each time it stung less and clarified more. They hadn't just assumed I'd stay quiet. They'd counted on it. They'd built this entire maneuver on the assumption that my need to belong would outweigh my sense of truth. They were wrong. As the final notes of the audio faded, I leaned back into the headboard, staring at the blades of the ceiling fan as they moved slowly overhead. The light outside had dimmed to gray, and the garden below was quiet now. The last of the guests were probably heading home with leftover tea cakes and vague impressions of a charming evening. I whispered into the stillness of the room, "Then I'll let them think I do." There's something dangerous about a perfectly set table, the kind of danger that wears pearls, not daggers. They called it brunch, but it felt like a stage. The long table stretched across the back porch, its surface gleaming with silver cutlery and monogram napkins folded into tight triangles. Biscuits rested in a linen-lined basket, steam barely rising from them now. The fruit had been chilled, sliced just thin enough to show care, but not too thin to look desperate. And the camera, subtle, black, standing tall on its tripod, faced us with quiet intent. "For posterity," Graham had said with that lawyerly tone that always came with a soft chuckle, like everything was already under control. I didn't smile. Vanessa, on the other hand, was practically glowing. Her dress was a pale coral linen that matched the roses on the table. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and an extra sparkle in her eye. "You look rested," she said as she adjusted her glass. "Amazing what a little homecoming can do." I took my seat, one of the center chairs between Charles and Graham. Diana sat at the head, spine straight, her pearl earrings catching the early light. Charles looked like he wanted to disappear behind his coffee cup. His hand trembled just slightly when he lifted it. There were no second chances in this family, only carefully orchestrated do-overs. Graham began the proceedings like a man narrating his own promotion. He opened a thick folder filled with color-coded tabs and cleared his throat. His voice had that polished southern lilt that made everything sound friendlier than it was. "As of next quarter," he began, "the Whitmore Trust will undergo a formal consolidation, bringing together property holdings, investment portfolios, and pending interests under the new family development umbrella. This ensures streamlined disbursement, greater asset protection, and, most importantly, strategic positioning for long-term stability." He flipped a page and continued. "And thanks to Isabel's signed consent, we're able to move forward efficiently." At that moment, Vanessa raised her glass. "To Isabel," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "for finally coming around. It takes courage to do what's right." Everyone lifted their glasses. Diana nodded approvingly. Charles made a vague, clinking gesture. I didn't drink. Instead, I reached slowly to my side and pulled a slim folder from my tote bag, pale blue, clasped with a simple gold tab. I placed it on the table in front of Graham. "This isn't mine," I said evenly, nodding toward his folder. "But this is. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless." Graham hesitated. The camera whirred softly as it adjusted focus. He opened the folder and the light air around the table shifted. First page, an injunction from Judge Carter in Chatham County, marked with a court seal. Second page, a notarized affidavit from me, dated and signed in front of a state witness, stating I had never authorized, signed, or consented to the restructuring of the trust. Graham's eyes darted down the page. Charles leaned in slowly. Vanessa didn't move. Diana continued buttering a biscuit, but the knife paused a second longer than necessary. I reached again into my bag and pulled out a compact, Bluetooth speaker. I placed it in the center of the table and tapped the power button. A soft beep. Then I pressed play. The porch filled with quiet crackle, then 2 familiar voices. Vanessa, clear and unbothered. She won't fight. She still thinks we love her. Then Diana, her voice silk and steel. Then use that. It's all we have left. No one spoke. The sound of a bird chirping in the tree line somehow made it worse. Naomi appeared on the steps then, her flats silent against the painted wood. She carried nothing but presence. Just her, standing tall in pale gray slacks and a blouse the color of stone. She didn't wait for permission. She just looked at them all and said, "You said she wouldn't fight." She stepped onto the porch fully. She just did. The cicadas shrieked faintly in the hedges. The camera blinked red, still recording. Graham shuffled the folder shut, lips pressed into a line. Diana placed her knife gently on the plate, her hand steady, but her nostrils flared. Then came the first buzz. A phone, then another. Charles checked his pocket, muttering, "Oh no." Vanessa's glass hovered midair. She looked at me, eyes narrowed, voice sharpened by disbelief. "You recorded us." I didn't blink. "No." I let the pause hang, long enough for all of them to sit with it. "Your housemaid did." A ripple. Diana blinked once visibly. "Funny," I continued, "what people catch when you stop looking at them, when you stop treating them like they matter." Vanessa's jaw tensed. Graham closed the folder too quickly, the paper edge catching slightly. Charles set his phone down with a soft clack and leaned back, sighing like a man who just remembered where the edge of the cliff was. Diana said nothing, but her lips had lost their color. I sat back, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. Let them scramble. Let them feel what it was like to sit in silence and not be sure who held the power. They had counted on obedience. They had banked on the idea that I still needed their approval more than I needed the truth. But now, the record showed otherwise. And for the first time, I wasn't seated at the table because they gave me a spot. I was here because I'd built my own. 1 week later, Savannah felt different. Or maybe I did. The heat had broken just enough to let the wind breathe again. I parked on the edge of the old cemetery and walked the winding path toward the Langford plot, now quiet under an overcast sky. Dusk hung low, turning the air a soft blue. Spanish moss dipped from the trees in heavy curtains, and the stone path beneath my shoes crunched faintly with dried leaves. I carried nothing with me but a small velvet box in one hand and a memory in the other. When I reached the headstone, simple granite, clean lines, no embellishments, I crouched slowly. My grandfather's name was etched with quiet dignity. Below it, one line: "Build with truth." I opened the box. Inside lay the bracelet, the original, the one he gave me when I was 13, back when all I wanted was to matter to someone without having to prove it. I'd worn it through college interviews, gallery rejections, and long nights in Atlanta when I wasn't sure if art or family would leave me lonelier. Now, I didn't need it as armor. I rested the bracelet gently against the base of the stone. "You knew," I said. "You always knew they'd try to twist what you built." My voice didn't break. Not anymore. Grief had already done its work. "I didn't want the money," I whispered. "I just wanted to stop feeling like I owed them my silence." Wind moved through the trees above like a low exhale. "You tried to make me a signature," I said, quieter now. "But I remembered I was a story." I stood, brushing dust from my knees, and took one last look at the grave. Not in mourning, not even in finality. Just acknowledgement. The next morning, back in Atlanta, my apartment welcomed me with stillness, the kind I hadn't known how to value before. I made coffee slowly, grounding myself in the scent. My plants, neglected but stubborn, had survived the absence. The light came in, slanted through the blinds, catching the dust in the air like snow suspended mid-fall. I opened my laptop to check emails, not expecting anything urgent. But one subject line stopped me. Rooted Futures Collective. Invitation I clicked. "Isabel, we saw your story. Thank you for the clarity, the quiet power of how you chose to speak. We're beginning a new art and memory project about truth, reclamation, and legacy. Would you be interested in contributing? Voice, image, or both?" The message was simple. No pressure, no flourish, just an invitation. I sat for a moment, hands resting on the keyboard, thinking not about revenge or justice, but about growth. I typed one word in response: interested. The click of send was quieter than I expected, but something inside me settled. Naomi called that afternoon. She didn't say much. Neither did I. But when she asked how I felt, I told her the truth. Lighter. Not finished, but freer. She smiled through the line. "That's how healing works. Not loud, just real." I walked to my studio later, a modest space tucked above a coffee shop. The windows were high, the walls blank. The canvas on the easel waited for something new. No deadlines, no clients, just possibility. I pulled out a set of charcoal pencils and stood in front of the canvas. My hands hovered for a second, then moved. I didn't draw a name. I drew a window, wide open, the curtains pulled back, light spilling in from a source you couldn't see, only feel. I stayed there for a long while, letting the silence be more than absence, letting it be space. Outside, the world moved on. News traveled. I heard Bernard was being formally investigated. His firm issued a statement about compliance restructuring. Vanessa? She scrubbed her online presence clean. Diana released a note about wellness leave and was reportedly heading to a mountain retreat with no reception. None of it surprised me. I didn't need retribution, just distance. They built their kingdom on borrowed names. I walked away with my own. And the truth? They faked love to take my name. I faked silence to take it back. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. I didn't need to win their game. I just needed to remember I had the right to my own name, my own story. In this life, silence isn't always surrender, and family isn't always defined by blood, but by who sees your worth without needing proof. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over bitterness, growth over vengeance. And when we stop asking for permission to be ourselves, we often find the freedom we were denied for so long. If this story found a quiet place in your heart, I'd love to hear what stayed with you. Feel free to share your thoughts or memories, because sometimes the truth begins when we speak it out loud.